Smart Defense. One of the active defense products you're going to hear about when you deal with CheckPoint is their technology called Smart Defense. Smart Defense is really a suite, if you like, of different technologies all branded together under a common brand called Smart Defense. Now this includes technologies like stateful inspection, web and application intelligence and so forth, and all of these things are designed to prevent both known and unknown attacks before they enter your network. Now the good news as a CheckPoint administrator is that while Smart Defense provides real-time information on attacks, attack detection, auditing, logging and alerting, it does it through a single centralized console, which is, by the way, active even if you haven't explicitly defined rules in your rule base. So let's go and take a look. In our Smart Center console here, at the top we're going to click on the Smart Defense tab, and this is going to take us straight into the first section here, which is where we're able to download any updates to Smart Defense services. Now, if this is the first time that you're installing your CheckPoint infrastructure, then I'd certainly advise that you click on this online update button and head off online and check with CheckPoint to see if there's any new updates that should apply to your system. And it's kind of like with Windows Update. If there's any security updates that would apply to your system, it's a little bit silly to not apply them, if you know what I mean. Because a security product that's out of date really isn't all that secure when you think about it. So yes, you should check just to be sure. Now in the next option here, Protection Overview. This is where you're going to find a list of all the protection categories that CheckPoint is actively protecting and what the default protection mode is. And you will note that some of these here are active and some are inactive. In fact, a lot more things are inactive in a default configuration. Now, if you haven't been around computer security for a while, some of these categories that we might be looking at here may be a little foreign to you, but you've all probably heard of things like a denial of service attack. But some of the subcategories that we're looking at here might be a little new: teardrop, ping of death, land attacks, TCP flooding, and so forth. Now from this list here, obviously you can see what the default settings are for each of them, whether they're active or whether they're inactive. But if you right click on any of these, you see we do have the option here to set them to active or inactive as the case may be. Now we could also choose to export this list to a CSV file if we like. But the final option here at the top is See Details. Now when we choose this option, what it's going to do is locate the configuration page for this protection method, which will be located somewhere underneath one of these three headings: Network Security, Application Intelligence, and Web Intelligence. So in my experience, rather than expanding out all of these, in fact let's just go back to Protection Overview here, I think it's easier to locate the protection method from this list here and then get to the location that way. So let's select one again. We'll just choose the first one for argument's sake here, the teardrop attack. We'll right click, we'll choose See Details, and it will take us underneath the network security tree, underneath denial of service category, and into the teardrop page. Now with most of these protections, you're going to encounter a very similar window like this one, where you're able to activate or deactivate, or in other words, turn on or turn off this protection. So apart from turning on or turning off protection for preventing teardrop denial of service attacks, from this window, the only other thing we can really decide to do is if we want to log this information. And that's about it. But you will note that for some of these protections on the left-hand side here, for example, if we were to expand IP and ICMP and choose, say, max ping size, in the right-hand side of the console here, you'll note that we do have another option here to monitor only, and that's pretty much it. In most cases, you'll have two options, sometimes three. Now, I'm not about to go through all of these different types of protections here, since that'd not only fill a couple of videos, but it'd also be pretty boring. So let's do a quick summary of what these things are for. And I would suggest, if you're at all interested in learning more about these things, then head off and throw a query at your favorite search engine for more information. Now you also will note though that down the bottom of this window, you're going to see here a description of what this threat entails and how Smart Defense protects against it. So you've got a little bit of information there if you choose to read it. Alright, well let's go back to the left hand side here. And under our network security heading, we've got denial of service attacks, which you will see are also referred to as a DOS attack. Now these denial of service attacks are designed to prevent the normal operation of resources that they're supposed to have. For example, by bombarding a web server with bogus traffic, if you hit it with enough data, then it will stop being able to dish up web pages to real legitimate requests. And if it's hit with enough traffic or enough specific types of traffic, then it can crash the target machine. So SmartDefense includes these protections to actively prevent and deal with these types of problems. Now the next category we have on the left hand side here is IP and ICMP and TCP, and this is where SmartDefense will utilize layer 3 and layer 4 tests to ensure that packets are using only the correct options and not using techniques like large ping sizes in an attempt to cause buffer overflows or anything like that. Now, a popular technique of attackers is to try and fingerprint a targeted system in an attempt to find out what operating system the target's running. You see, if an attacker can determine that you're running Windows 2000 Server, for example, then they can look specifically for known attacks for that particular operating system. Now, fingerprint scrambling is where we can use techniques to distort the real fingerprint of the operating system that's sitting behind our CheckPoint gateway. So the people on the other side, they're not able to easily determine what it's running. Now next we have successive events, and this allows us to detect suspicious events and then to notify an administrator that we might be experiencing an attack. So for example, if we expand this and if we were to have the bottom one, successive multiple connections rule active, then you could elect to be notified if more than a certain number of connections are occurring within a specific time frame. So if you were alerted to the fact that one machine was trying to establish 100 simultaneous connections to another, then you might consider that to be abnormal and maybe a virus or spyware or some other attack that's in progress, and then you could investigate. Next is DeShield Storm Center, and this is where you can set up a login to DeShield if you have one, which is a centralized place on the internet that provides warnings and an analysis service to help combat malicious attacks. So I'd suggest checking out DeShield.org in your spare time, and you'll most likely find that some of the articles and posts there are really informative. Now if you do decide to use this feature, you're then able to block malicious IP addresses at your gateway. Now this feature works kind of like a real-time block list for mail servers, except here you could get a copy of a block list of IP addresses from DeShield and then use that to block IP addresses at your gateway. Now we can also deal with port scans and sweep scans as well, which are scans directed at lots of different ports on a single machine or the same port on different machines. Now if you don't already understand what a port scan is, it's not really an attack, it's more of a collection of information trying to find out if ports are open on a given machine. Now since we can find out that a certain port is open, that's going to aid an attacker in identifying what applications are installed on the target machine. So these features of course go some way to prevent that from happening. Now under the application intelligence section, we've got protection options for a bunch of these different applications here or protocols, and you're instantly going to recognize a lot of these things like mail servers, FTP, Microsoft networks, peer-to-peer applications, things like email and BitTorrent and instant messaging applications. We have things like here MSN, Skype, Yahoo, DNS, voice over IP, and so forth. Now there's a lot of different applications here, and since attacks on these type of applications are widespread, SmartDefense has inbuilt these mechanisms to deal with these sort of attacks. Now finally at the bottom we have our web intelligence section, and this is designed to secure our web servers and web service applications. So this section contains protections designed specifically for web-based attacks, things like malicious code protections and application layer protections for things like cross-site scripting or SQL injection and so forth. Now with any of these three areas, it's a pretty simple task to run through the list and then configure anything specifically that you might need. Although you will find that the default protections are going to cover most of what you probably need, there will likely be some specific application protections that you want to activate or at least monitor, so you can come in here and set that up pretty easy. Now the final options we have right down the bottom here is where we can manage our SmartDefense profiles and also choose where these profiles are assigned. You see, by default, we only have the one default protection profile, and this lets us run through these three categories here: our network security, application intelligence, web intelligence, configure all of them the way that we want them, and then save those configurations right into this profile. Then if we had multiple gateways, we could simply assign this profile to all of our gateways. Or if we like, we could assign different profiles to different gateways. And it's all pretty easy to do as well. If we select our profile here from the list and we'll choose New, we could choose to create just a blank new profile, or we could clone the existing one, which is probably a better idea. That way we don't have to go through the entire exercise and configure this entire list and edit everything. So let's clone the existing one. I'll give it a name here. I'm going to call this one, instead of copy of default protection, I'll just call this one new protection. And I'll leave the comment field blank and we'll give it a color. We'll set it to say pink and we'll click on OK. Now you can see we've got two profiles. And if we now click on the profile assignment option, and here you're going to see a list of the gateways you have and what policy they're currently applying. Now obviously in my network here I only have the one, so we're obviously applying the default protection profile at this time. But let's put our fantasy wizard caps on for a moment and imagine that I've got a list of gateways here. You could simply select a gateway from the list, click the edit button, and this is going to open up the properties window for our gateway right here at the SmartDefense page. And here we could change our default protection profile to our new protection profile if we like. And of course we could also turn off SmartDefense for this gateway as well. Now the final piece to this SmartDefense puzzle is to be found here on this SmartDefense Services tab. And this is where you'll set up your login details to the CheckPoint User Center, and this is where you'll be able to log in and download any updates that have been made to SmartDefense. Now this is also just like Windows Update for your firewall really, so it's a good idea to set this up just to ensure that the latest threats are being dealt with. So in this video we've talked about the SmartDefense features of the CheckPoint firewall and how these components work to defend your network against both known and unknown attacks. Remember though, not all of the protections that are available are actually active, so it's worth taking a look, running down the protection overview list, and then taking a moment to think about what protections you'd like to see active, or perhaps those that you'd at least like to monitor. So we hope you've enjoyed this video and would like to thank you for watching.